It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy
Welcome to another episode of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. John Schmeelk, Matthew Citak with you as we continue our opponent preview series with training camp. Now, believe it or not, less than a week away, and the chaos begins. And now we are happy to continue to go later on in the schedule. We're into December now, folks, and we welcome in Vinny Bonsignore from VegasNation.com, Raider Nation Radio, and Las Vegas Review Journal. Vinny, you got John Schmeelk and Matthew Citak here in East Rutherford, the Giants facility. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me. And man, as quickly as, or as soon as training camp is here, it basically is here. That game seems like such a far away. I'm very curious to see where the Giants are and where the Raiders are. What is that? The second and last week of the season. So it might be two completely different teams, and they might go on 2 or 3 or 4 different journeys before we actually get to that last game. Who's going to be the quarterback for the Giants? What's the Raiders record going to be? A lot of intrigue, even though that game feels like forever away.
Yeah, and I got to imagine, Vinny, that there's got to be a lot of optimism for the Raiders, right? You know, you're bringing Pete Carroll, who's a proven NFL head coach. You're bringing Geno Smith, who's a good NFL quarterback. What's been just the general vibes around the building, the fans, and what kind of presence has Pete Carroll been just renewing? And by the way, we love Antonio Pierce, so I'm quite sure the culture under Pierce was also very good, but we know that's what Pete Carroll does, right? How has it been with kind of Pete Carroll there establishing a culture that only Pete Carroll can establish?
Yeah, no question about it. But you really have to go back to last October when Tom Brady was approved as one of the new owners of the Raiders. It really kind of started there. A lot of what they're doing now, setting the tone, being about, everything that it takes to be a winner. So I go back to that, and the positivity, the optimism is real here for the first time in a long time. And yes, everybody does love Antonio Pierce, but even this time last year, all right, it's his first training camp. It's his first full season in charge. It's the first time he's put together a full staff. What is he going to be like game in and game out on Sundays in the preparation, for every game? There were a lot of concerns with Antonio Pierce. There's really zero with Pete Carroll, unless you're worried about the age. Yes, he's 73 years old. He'll be 74 years old during the season, but I say 73 years young, because this guy gives everybody a run for the money when it comes to the energy level. So the questions that were here last year, I can't think of a single one, with Pete Carroll. This time last year, you're just like it was with Josh McDaniels and maybe some other coaches that the Raiders had here. You're wondering and thinking about reasons why this is not going to work, why this is going to be the same thing that's happened with so many other coaching situations here with the Raiders. With Pete Carroll,
we know the feeling, Vinny, by the way. We know the feeling.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. For the first time in a long time, there's really more reasons why this is going to succeed than fail. And I would be surprised if it didn't work out.
Yeah. So the first big move that Pete Carroll made as head coach was obviously bringing in his former quarterback with the Seahawks in Geno Smith. Now, Geno's coming off sort of a mixed bag last year. He set new career highs in passing yards and completion percentage, but also threw 15 interceptions with just 21 touchdowns. So I guess, how did Geno look throughout the spring? And I guess, what are expectations for both Geno and the Raiders offense overall?
Well, and you're right about, the 15 interceptions. A number of those were in the red zone. When you watch the tape and kind of peel back a little bit, you understand that he was dealing with one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL and really a non-existent running game. So you do wonder, was he trying to do too much? If that was the case, then hopefully for Geno and the Raiders, that gets fixed this year. But if it continues to be a persistent problem, that will be a problem. But even that year, would have felt like nirvana here for the Raiders last year when you're talking about Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. The floor of the quarterback room has been lifted significantly. You could see that during OTAs and minicamp. There was no question who the starter was. This time last year, there was a quarterback battle going on. And quite frankly, it was, for anyone that was there day in and day out, and unfortunately or fortunately, whatever you want to call it, I was there every day. It was bad. It was you understood even in minicamp and OTAs and going into training camp, that it was going to be a struggle for the Raiders to score points. Primarily, one of the main reasons was because of the quarterback play. That's changed this year. You can see that it's just better equipped, better handled, and in a better position to do better this year. So even last year with those struggles, that would have been a pretty darn good year for the Raiders quarterbacks last year.
There are three things you can count on in life, Vinny: death, taxes, and Pete Carroll drafting running backs high. And he got a really good one this year in Ashton Genty. What did you see from him in the spring? And is this offense really going to revolve around him?
Yes and no. Don't forget about a guy by the name of Brock Bowers, number 89. He's going to be.
Hey, he's not bad.
He's not bad. But I was kidding. But it's interesting with Ashton, because those of us who live here in Las Vegas, and I've only been here about 5 years, but I did get 2 years of Ashton Genty against UNLV and the Mountain West Conference, which is the conference here. And fortunately, UNLV was pretty darn good the last couple of years, and they played Boise State in some big games. This guy is just spectacular. There's no other way to put it. And I've seen him live 3 times now. In addition to also seeing him, during practices. There's just, it's. You talk to Pete Carroll about it, and it's funny when he starts talking about Ashton Genty, because when you talk about Pete Carroll, he's been around since he coached with Bud Grant. That just says it all. So in his memory bank, and you can see it in his face and his eyes when he says Ashton, he kind of reminds me, and he always stops short before he goes there, because I can only imagine in his head all the running backs that he's either coached or coached against in NFL history that he's starting to picture when he's thinking about Ashton, and stop short of putting that kind of pressure on him. But I will. He does remind you of Barry Sanders. He does remind you of Marshall Faulk. He does remind you of LaDainian Tomlinson. This is just a guy that's a rare breed at running back. And there was some internal debate, with the Raiders. Do you draft a running back that high at number 6? But at the end of the day, he's just so good and such a dynamic force, both as a runner and you'll see it in the passing game. They're gonna involve him there. He's just a home run at any time, at any point in the field, and it goes, to your point, right up Pete Carroll's alley and Chip Kelly's. Quite honestly, the new offensive coordinator, they want to run the ball, they want to control the line of scrimmage and control the game and play on their terms. And I almost said Marshall Faulk, and Ashton Genty gives them a chance to do that. Absolutely.
So you mentioned Brock Bowers, of course, the second-year tight end is coming off record-setting rookie year, 112 receptions, almost 1,200 yards. The only reason why Malik Neighbors didn't set the all-time rookie record was because of Brock Bowers' performance. Now with Geno Smith here, obviously you expect some improved quarterback play. Is it possible that for Brock Bowers to have an even better season? Like, what are expectations for him in year 2 now?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you could kind of see it going both ways. You could see the numbers go up. Or you could see, because there's Ashton Genty and they invested heavily in wide receiver in the draft, or you could see the numbers going down, but the impact going up. But it's hard for me to imagine that they're not going to try earnestly to get the ball into Brock Bowers' hands. And when I say impact, I guess what I'm saying is, there were so many times last year where we would talk to Brock Bowers after games, and you could see him saying, or thinking. And it was kind of expressing how he talked about himself. You want me to talk about myself right now, but we just lost again. This is like the 8th straight week that we've lost, or the 10th straight week that we lost. This is a guy that lost, maybe on one hand, you could count the losses that he had at Georgia. And he won back-to-back national championships. He doesn't like to lose. And so it was a grind for him and a challenge for him to talk about himself when they were losing. When they won games, I mean, he was just a different person. So when I say impact, if the Raiders can get this turned around and all of a sudden Brock Bowers is making putting up those type of numbers in winning situations, getting a game-winning touchdown, converting a key third down in a fourth down drive that clocks the game, just big moments, and he's capable of the kind of the moments that you saw him do at Georgia. So while the numbers may stay the same or maybe even dip a little bit depending on how they disperse the football, I would imagine the impact's going to go up. And to me, that's how memories are made. When Raider fans think of Brock Bowers 15, 20 years down the road, they may be thinking about a player that put up a lot of numbers, but did so in some important situations. That's going to be the key to it all.
All right, we've had a lot of positives here, Vinny. I'm going to hit the 2 question marks, at least what I think are question marks on the offense. Those are the weapons in wide receiver. Just not a lot of proven guys there. Jacoby Myers is a good, solid vet. Other than that, I think Trey Tucker can get deep, but you don't know what else you're getting from him. And then protection on the offensive line. We like Colton Miller. I love Jackson Powers Johnson coming out. I thought you guys got a really good value when you picked him where you did. Alex Kaplan just got brought in. Talk about the targets for Geno and then the protection for Geno and what you're kind of keeping an eye on this summer as to how those 2 units could impact the overall success of this offense.
Yeah, you're spot on with the wide receivers because outside of Jacoby Myers and a little bit of Trey Tucker, there's really nothing there. And it's nothing personal against anybody. It's just that they're rookies. Jack Bech is a rookie. Dante Thornton is a rookie. Tommy Mellott is a rookie. There's promise without question. There's a lot of potential there, but until it translates onto the football field, that's all it is. So there is major concern, at least from a reliability standpoint, about some of those guys. Don't forget Michael Mayer. I think he's going to be much more involved this year. The second string tight end. I think Chip Kelly and the Raiders offense has an intentionality to get him involved. So we'll see how he kind of slots in there. The protection, fair question as well, and a fair concern. The offensive line started getting better last year after they made the offensive coaching change. They fired Luke Getsy, their offensive coordinator, and their offensive line coach. It started getting better, and it really started getting better when Jackson became the full-time center, and DJ Glaze, another had a really solid rookie season, 3rd-round pick from Maryland, solidified right tackle. So there's actually a lot of continuity outside of Alex Kaplan. We'll see if he hangs on to his job at right guard. He didn't have the greatest season last year, and if he bounces back, great. If not, they're going to have to figure that position out, and there's some candidates to do that. But it feels like the continuity is better. There's a lot more experience now with Jackson and DJ having their solid rookie years. So there's reason to believe that it can be better. And they weren't awful in terms of pass protection. Where they really struggled was in the run game, although you'd get an argument on whether it was their fault or the running back's fault. I guess we're going to find out. There's no more excuses with Ashton Genty. They need to run the ball. And if they can't with Ashton Genty, then that's a real offensive line problem. So we'll see. That is a concern right now. But what's interesting to me is that when you look at the Raiders offense, and yes, the wide receivers behind Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker are a concern, but when you have Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers and Ashton Genty and Michael Mayer, I think they feel pretty good about where it is right now and where it can potentially be if Jack Bech develops as they expect and Dante Thornton becomes, somewhat maybe a rotational or a situational wide receiver. But when you think about this offense this year compared to last year, for it to only really be, hey, will Jack Bech translate to the NFL and is this offensive line, going to take a step back or continue the momentum that it created last year for itself? It makes it a far cry, from last year. Last year it was just like, oh boy, they're not going to score any points, and they certainly didn't.
Yeah, moving over to the other side of the ball now. Of course, when you talk about the Raiders defense, it all starts with Max Crosby, and he got rewarded with a humongous extension earlier in this offseason. But just talk about some of the other changes that the Raiders made on the defensive side of the ball, some of the new guys that were brought in, and why the Raiders could make a potential step or a leap on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and that is a little bit of a concern because there was a lot of changeover. They've got new starting linebackers, Landon Roberts and Devin White. They've got a new safety in Jeremy Chin. New cornerbacks, Eric Stokes, and at least going off OTAs and minicamp, Darren Porter, the rookie from Iowa State, was the starter over there. So it's a really revamped defense. They let a lot of guys walk that scored bigger contracts outside their building. Robert Spillane, Trayvon Merrick, Nate Hobbs. So they're going to have to figure out ways to replace some people that put up some pretty decent numbers last year. But it does kind of start with Max Crosby. He got hurt in week 2 against the Baltimore Ravens, a really nasty ankle injury, kind of ironically, the last play of the game, I think it was. And it was really never the same last year. And they finally shut him down with about 4 games left. Getting him back healthy, and he looked electric out there during the spring, will definitely help. Getting Malcolm Kuntz, who they were relying on as as a productive pass rusher last year, but he went down with a season-ending knee injury like 3 days before the season opener. Never had Malcolm. He's back on target to play. But really, the big concern right now is Christian Wilkins. He suffered a foot injury, a season-ending foot injury in week 5. Had surgery, was looking to come back toward the end of last year, but they shut him down. There was really nothing to play for. But then in January, he suffered some sort of a setback. Last we saw him, he was in his walking boot again, missed all of the spring, all of minicamp. Don't know what his status is going to be. Going to find out here in about a week or so. Whether he's ready to start training camp or whether there's going to be some delay. So they need their big defensive tackle. He was their big free agent signing last year, to be healthy. If he's not, that's a problem right there.
I feel like they're putting a lot of faith, Vinny, into Patrick Graham to make do with this secondary. I mean, Jeremy Chinn's a good player. Darian Porter was not just a rookie, a pretty raw rookie. He played cornerback, 2 years, I think, after he converted over from wide receiver.
Yeah, and only started one.
Exactly. So, Darnay Holmes, I mean, we have a lot of familiarity with Darnay Holmes here. It's been a while since he's been a starter in the league. Eric Stokes, he couldn't hold the job in Green Bay. I know Patrick Graham's a good coordinator, and he plays a lot of zone. He's not going to put these guys in man-to-man situations, but boy, you're in a division with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert, and with the Sean Payne did with Bo Nix last year. I think your offense might have to score a lot of points with this secondary, Vinny.
Yeah, and part of that's going to be can the front 4 create consistent pressure? That'll, if they can, then that's certainly going to help the secondary. But no question, there's concerns there. But you mentioned Patrick Graham, but don't forget, this is Pete Carroll's team now, and really his defense. And it'll be very interesting, just talking to some people in the NFL, how that all works, because Patrick Graham and Pete Carroll run two different types of defenses. And from my understanding, talking to some people in the building, it's going to be a blending of both philosophies and both schemes. So, we'll see how that plays out. And I guess the one thing that probably should give Raider fans a little bit of hope is that at his core, Pete Carroll is a defensive back. He played defensive back in high school and college, coached it in college, coached it in the NFL. That's where he made his payway. And then become a defensive coordinator and a great head coach. So he knows defensive backs, and he's got a long track record and history of developing guys, and especially guys that, he drafted later on in the draft, not just the first round picks, but the 5th and the 6th and the undrafted free agents. So we were here, during the spring, wondering, are they going to make another move at cornerback or in the secondary? And there's some guys out there. Mike Hilton's still out there, with the Cincinnati Bengals, and he's unsigned. But as the days kept passing by and no movement was made, with the cornerback room, especially after OTAs and minicamp, you start to wonder, okay, maybe they saw what they wanted to see from that group, and maybe Pete, with all his magic and all his madness when it comes to the secondary, feels like they're going to be able to get that squared away. But for me, it's still a concern. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did make another move, but as of right now, they haven't. So they must like what they've seen so far in that young secondary.
You're good, Matt?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, I want to ask about Tom Brady, because you mentioned him at the top, Vinny, before we say goodbye. To what extent is he present, I guess, is my question. Like, he's not a majority owner, but we know he's they're taking advice on football decisions? Is he like the quasi general manager? Like, what's the level of involvement and presence that Tom Brady has in that organization? Or do people even know, to be honest with you?
Yeah, I would say I would classify it as omnipresent. I know that he's not in the building every day. He's got a lot of other endeavors, that he's a part of. But he's always a phone call away or a text away, and that to me that makes all the difference in the world. So he's a tone setter. He's somebody that look the general manager John Spytek was his college teammate at Michigan. John Spytek's not here. If it wasn't for Tom Brady, and John has a nice track record and resume. Don't get me wrong. He's very good at what he does and has been a part of some really good organizations, including in Tampa when Tom and he and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won a Super Bowl. But he's probably about as good a confidant, observer, a wealth of knowledge that you could possibly find. And it's really not just Tom. They brought in three others that are big time kind of business people that have run really successful businesses in their own right, and they've changed how they're doing things on the business side. But they were all part of the hiring process for Pete Carroll, so they're part of the football side of it as well. But to answer your question, it's huge, and he's always available. So it's not like they go months without talking or weeks without talking. It's probably, I would say, on a daily basis or a multi-time per week basis. So it's big time, and there's been a noticeable change since he and the other new minority owners came aboard.
Has there been avocado ice cream dispensers installed in the cafeteria for you guys? No.
I have not seen any, but I would not be surprised. I know that he's made some changes on that side of things as well, and he's brought in some people that he knows really well to help with the nutrition and the bodybuilding and all of that type of stuff, the strength and conditioning. So there's definitely been changes along those lines as well. I don't know about the avocado though.
Vinny, tell all the folks where they can find all your stuff.
Yep, vegasnation.com. If you want to read all of our stuff, our podcasts are up there as well. And then Raider Nation Radio, I'm the co-host of the Morning Tailgate Show, 7 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. You can stream it on Raiders.com.
That is awesome. Vinny, awesome stuff, my friend. We'll see you in a few months. Enjoy the grind. In fact, where do the Raiders do camp? Are you guys in Vegas or do you go somewhere?
Well, they were supposed to go to or leave. They were dabbling with going back up to Napa Valley. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. So we're in Henderson, which is where their practice facility is. So you can expect some very, very, very early morning practices to beat the heat. It is what it is.
I would say, and maybe some indoor practices as well. Vinny, good stuff, my friend. Enjoy the grind. We'll see you in a few months.
All right, guys. Take care. Thanks for having me.
We thank Vinny Bonsignor for joining us. Great information there on the Las Vegas Raiders. Now we turn our attention to another one of the Giants' opponents in December. Who knows what they look like then, but we can at least find out what they look like now from Matthew Collar, who covers them for Purple Insider. Matt, good to talk to you again, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is one of my favorite things. I do this on my show as well. Like, let's talk about a game that's going to happen many, many months from now and what's going on in the offseason. And you know what? We're all so obsessed with football that everybody still loves it.
All right, so much like the Giants, where there's been just a ton of conversation about the quarterback position this offseason, it's been the same for the Vikings. They decide to move on from Kirk Cousins. They go to Sam Darnold, move on from Sam Darnold, and now they're on to J.J. McCarthy. So what did they see from him in the spring, and what do you think expectations are for what J.J. is going to bring to the field this season?
Yeah, the big thing with the spring was, is he back to 100% health? I mean, going through a meniscus tear is really tricky. I mean, he had to have the full surgery, which means the total repair, better for him in the long term, but that's a much longer and more challenging recovery that I think was difficult for him, both physically and mentally. But to get back on the field to start, it was around January where he actually got out there and started throwing again. So he had 4 or 5 months before they started OTAs and minicamp for him to feel like he was fully recovered, fully back. And then on the first OTA practice that was open to the media, first couple of throws, he came out and let us know that he was back. There was one throw where I think it was maybe Jordan Addison was kind of coming right at us on the sideline. You know how the situations work.
Yep.
And he let it rip much harder than he actually had to throw it, just to kind of let us all know, you guys see the velocity on my arm, which I know has been something that people have debated. I don't think there's a whole lot of question after seeing it up close what JJ can do in terms of his arm strength. But the big challenge for him is that when you look at the rest of this team, it is stacked. They have veteran players at every single position. If you go through people's positional rankings and things like that, you're going to find the Vikings receivers, offensive line, defensive line, all over the place. And you have this quarterback who's never played before. And that is a really fascinating dynamic. But one thing that I should say from what we saw from him in the spring is this is not a rookie quarterback. You'll hear that a lot from people. Well, he's basically a rookie, but not really, because he had all of last year. He learned the offense. He learned what it meant to be an NFL quarterback. And even though he couldn't practice due to the injury, he got to see Sam Darnold run Kevin O'Connell's offense. And he also got to see Sam Darnold deal with the ups and downs of the NFL, where one week you're the hero and the next week you're the GOAT in the bad way. And I think he learned a ton from that last year. So he looked comfortable to me in the offense. And I thought he looked physically very, very strong. And now it's kind of off we go. It's really hard to tell in those mini camps and OTAs. It's really not till we get into training camp till we really see when they're out of that install period and they're really trying to ramp things up. But McCarthy was very, very good in training camp last year. And I think that was a major reason that they were comfortable moving on from Sam Darnold. And just judging by the way that everybody was acting, the other players, the coaches, I think that they feel like they made the right decision as of right now, and then we're going to find out going forward.
Now, we know, the three of us know that quarterback's best friend is a strong offensive line. And, the Vikings offensive line last year wasn't the greatest, finished in the top 10 in most sacks allowed. And clearly that was a priority in the offseason to address the offensive line with the additions of Ryan Kelly, Will Freeze, and of course, Donovan Jackson. So, of course, in the spring, there are no pads, as you mentioned, there's no contact. But how does the offensive line coming together? And on a side note, where does it look like Donovan Jackson is in his progress from last year's injury?
Yeah, I think we had the sense right there in week one last year when Dexter Lawrence got about 47 pressures that maybe the interior offensive line wasn't going to hold up if they faced the wrong team in the playoffs. And that's really what happened. They went into that game against the Los Angeles Rams feeling like they should have had a chance, and they walked out of it feeling like if they had a better interior offensive line, they would have had a chance. And I would tend to agree with that. It's been a bit of the bugaboo of the offense for, I would say, years. I mean, who doesn't remember the Kirk Cousins check down against the Giants in the playoffs? Well, why did that happen? Because Dexter Lawrence blasted through the left guard and was in the backfield immediately. And, I think that really sat poorly with Kevin O'Connell, that he felt like maybe I'd have 2 playoff wins if we invested in that interior line. And it's also getting, I think, harder and harder around the league to play guard, to play center. So they went out and they spent. And, Ryan Kelly to me is the key to the operation here, because he's not just a great player, a 4-time Pro Bowler. And if we go by PFF grades, one of the best pass blocking centers in the NFL over the last decade. But also, this guy has seen it all. He's done it all. I mean, he has played with all sorts of different types of quarterbacks. And I think what an underrated skill is now in the NFL for centers is being able to identify stunts, blitzes, twists, all the things that we know Brian Flores' defense loves to throw at people. But it's a copycat league, and you're seeing it week in and week out with all sorts of different blitzes, especially attacking the middle. And bringing in Ryan Kelly was bringing in someone who knows how to sort those things out, knows how to communicate, and knows how to lead a young quarterback. I mean, he was there for Andrew Luck. He was there for Anthony Richardson and everybody in between. He's got a lot of experience doing that. And as far as your question of, Donovan Jackson, in OTAs and minicamp, Kevin O'Connell truly does not believe in contact for the big men. And I agree with him. You got to stay healthy throughout the season. So it's hard to say how he looked out there just doing some individual patty cake drills with his friends. But as far as his actual fit, I think there's a few things that work really in Donovan Jackson's favor. One is that he's got Ryan Kelly and Christian Darrisaw on his right and left. So it's not like the Vikings brought him in to just be the offensive line and save the offensive line. He's got a lot of help on his left and right. The other thing is, too, that he proved a lot to the Vikings, and one of the reasons they loved him so much was that playing tackle last year for Ohio State. And he had to move from guard to tackle kind of on a whim because of some injuries. And by the time they got to the national championship game, he was a top-notch college left tackle playing against the best competition and performing at an extremely high level. And I think that said a lot about how quickly he can learn and adapt, and his intelligence as a player, and also his unselfishness, because there was some concern that could hurt his draft stock if he had a terrible year at a position that he had never played. So he is the top-notch athlete. I think they love his character. But we all know this. I mean, if he goes, up against the best of the best defensive tackles in the NFL right away, there will be a learning curve for Donovan Jackson. But maybe by the time he's facing off with the New York Giants, he's gotten into the swing of things. And I think we see that with offensive linemen a lot. The first couple of weeks are pretty rough. And then as they develop along the way, they can improve quickly if they're going to be a good one in the NFL. And I think Donovan Jackson can be.
Last one on the offense from me here, Matt. I think you talk about the pass protection, bringing in those guards, but I think trying to get the run game going was a big part of those moves too. Aaron Jones is a really good player, but they just have not been able to consistently get the running game going. I think they've been kind of hunting and pecking in terms of what scheme's going to work for them. And that's, Kevin O'Connell, for as great of an offensive coach as he is, and he's been a good head coach too, obviously, he just hasn't been able to figure out the running game. What do you think that's going to look like this year with Jones back? They bring in Jordan Mason as well. And is that really a priority for the offense this year, especially with J.J. McCarthy coming from such a heavy play action scheme in college to get that run game going?
Yeah, I think that was a massive priority. And you're right with J.J. McCarthy, that where he thrived a lot in college was running play action schemes of Jim Harbaugh's, and the Vikings want to do that as well. Last year, they had a ton of success running play action with Sam Darnold, but as the season wore on, and especially when Christian Darrisaw got hurt, and then they had to replace their right guard, Ed Ingram, with Dalton Reisner, who was a much worse run blocker, but much better pass blocker. They just were not able to intimidate anybody with that run game. And I think, the way things played out last year, is great as Sam Darnold was throwing the football, they could put it on his shoulders, but he was a veteran quarterback, and you could do that, especially as he got totally comfortable in the offense. I would not want to do that with J.J. McCarthy, where you're saying, okay, go throw the ball 40 times a game. And I think that was a major priority. And that's where Will Fries comes in. And it is pronounced Fries, by the way, which is awesome for an offensive lineman to have that as his pronunciation. We did double check with him. But
that's funny. By the way, it's funny you asked that, because we had that debate literally on our air last offseason, because the Giants have reported interest in him too. And I literally heard it both ways from like 2 or 3 different sources. And hell, if I could figure it out.
Yeah, we checked with him on his initial call with us. And hey, if I was an offensive lineman, I would also go by Fries as well.
Absolutely.
But the thing with him, though, is like his reputation in Indianapolis was a finisher, a physical player, bringing a violent presence to the offensive line. And the Vikings last year, if you guys think back, I know everybody in the world watched that Week 18 game where the Vikings melted down. But one of the reasons they lost was that they could not finish a drive in the red zone. If they could have just run the ball from the 5-yard line into the end zone, if they had any physical presence at all toward the goal line, I mean, that's a totally different ball game. And that's another thing that I think stuck with O'Connell. Like, you got to get nastier, you got to get more physical, and you have to be able to run the ball when you need to. And that's the other part of bringing in Jordan Mason, who, by the way, averages 5 yards a carry for his career. I know that's in San Francisco, where everybody tends to succeed, but the Vikings have now built an offensive line that should be able to run block in front of him. So I think they're more dynamic, but especially just more physical. And one of the issues last year was they would get up in some games and let opponents back because, well, they'd throw an interception, or they would have a 3-and-out where it's 2 pass incompletions and they're not running any clock, because I just don't think Kevin O'Connell really believed, hey, I could just pound the other team's face in and run the clock out. Well, they've got that, at least in theory, they've got that. But I think that there still is that question of the former quarterback O'Connell, who loves to pass the ball, and he's admitted, hey, we're always going to be a pass-first offense as long as I'm the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. So can he trust that run game enough to lean on it, because I feel like even at times in the past where it's been working, you can't keep him away from the pass button. He's like me playing Madden. You just got to throw it downfield. You can't just keep running the football.
Yeah, so John covered the run game, so I'll ask one last one about the passing game. Justin Jefferson, I mean, his game speaks for itself. He's one of the best, if not the best, wide receivers in the league. And same goes for TJ Hawkinson at tight end. You know, he came back from the injury last year, finished the season kind of strong. I don't know if I'd call it a question mark, but I guess the third option in the passing game, Jordan Addison, who had a little bit of an up and down year. You look at his final stats, they look pretty strong, but if you follow it as you obviously did throughout the season, it seemed like a little inconsistent. So for Jordan Addison, how do you look in the spring? What are expectations going into year 3? And this, you might be able to answer, but are there any updates on his legal situation that seem to finally be coming to a head now?
Yeah, so he is going to have another court date on Thursday, and then maybe we get some resolution by next week. But this is the most dragged out case I have ever seen in my life. I mean, it happened last summer, and then we're finally just getting resolution. The expectation is that if he is found guilty, that it will be a 3-game suspension, and more likely than not, that will come at the beginning of the season. So it will not affect Vikings Giants toward the back end of the season. But as far as his overall outlook, and that's no guarantee that even happens. So we'll see. The wheel of justice that Roger Goodell spins, we never really know. So but in general with Addison, I thought last year he took a pretty big step in the second half of the season. And one of the things that teams were able to do against him in his first year was they were just able to play physical against him at the line of scrimmage. He's not the biggest guy. He probably weighs about 175 pounds, but he started, I think, to understand how to play through a little more contact. I think he put on a little bit more muscle, and then just getting off of the line of scrimmage against press coverage and against physical play. But the advantage that Jordan Addison has is that I don't know if I've ever looked at the all 22 copy of the tape the next day and seen 2 people on Jordan Addison. I mean, he's always got one-on-one coverage, and he is so good at creating separation and winning one-on-one battles down the field that option is always there for the quarterback. But the thing is that when you play with Justin Jefferson, this is kind of like a fantasy stats versus real football thing. When Justin Jefferson is the other receiver, some weeks you're going to get 7 catches because they have thrown 3 guys at Justin Jefferson. And some weeks you're going to get 2 because he has 13. I mean, that's just going to happen when you play alongside the best wide receiver in the entire NFL. But I think from Addison, we were looking more for does his skill set start to expand? And remember, we see a lot of rookies coming in at 24 years old now. He came in just turning 21 years old, so he's 23 now. I mean, just starting to develop and get into his prime. But I think if you're JJ McCarthy and you've got that guy as your number 2 wide receiver, you are feeling pretty darn good about things.
All right, Matt, I think I only have one question on the defense, and it's the same question that I just asked to Vinny, who covers the Raiders. It seems like they're putting an awful lot of faith in the defensive coordinator. In their case, it was Patrick Graham. In your case, it's Brian Flores. When it comes to putting the secondary together, where there's not a ton of resources being spent there, you have Harrison Smith, who's almost my age, still playing safety. That's not a good thing, by the way. I'm over 40. He's not quite that old, but he's getting closer. Byron Murphy obviously has been successful. Josh Meadows is kind of an around the line of scrimmage type of guy. But man, I mean, Jeffrey Okudah, Isaiah Rodgers, I know he was better last year than a lot of people give him credit for. But what do you think this secondary is going to look like, and how is Brian Flores going to try to utilize this group in his sometimes, aiding coverage, sometimes blitzing everybody type of amoeba defense?
Hey, you know what's great, though, is that you could talk 98 Yankees with Harrison Smith and he would remember them. So, not most NFL players have that. That is probably the biggest question that we're asking going into training camp is what is this secondary going to look like? And are they going to have to do anything with it? I wondered if they would go after Jair Alexander. I wondered if they would go after Jalen Ramsey because they've put so much into every other position. Last offseason, they signed Jonathan Grenard, Blake Cashman, Andrew Van Ginkel, and then they add Javon Hargrave and they add Jonathan Allen to this thing. I mean, it is a pretty beastly front 7, but they are kind of leaning on some small sample sizes. Now, Byron Murphy Jr. got a huge contract in the offseason, well-deserved. 6 interceptions last year, but he's also a leader for that group and a perfect kind of Brian Flores player who can handle a lot mentally. But Mekhi Blackmon and Isaiah Rodgers have had more small sample success. Mekhi Blackmon was good as a 3rd-round rookie in 2023, but then he tore his ACL on the first day of training camp last year. So he's been waiting an entire year for this opportunity to get out there. And we don't really know. I mean, corners, sometimes they could play in the league for 3-4 years and we feel like we still don't really know what they are. And with Isaiah Rodgers, he's such an interesting case because he was suspended for a year for a gambling incident. And then he comes back with Philadelphia. He's a part-time player, but he was a good part-time player. And the same went for when he was with Indianapolis. And this is somebody that Brian Flores has had his eye on for a long time. And just getting a small look at him, the athleticism is through the roof. I mean, he's a guy that at a pro day ran a sub 4.3. So even if we adjust that for pro day, that's still, probably around 4.3, 4.4 speed. He's been a kick returner. He's an explosive player, but it is a guy who's never played 1,000 snaps in a season before. So there's a lot of trust there. I think what the Vikings secondary, though, has in their pocket for this year that is helpful is a front four that can rush the passer. In the past, it's been a lot of blitzing and just sort of playing in zones and kind of trying to rally to the tackle if, the quarterback gets the ball out, under pressure. And all of it seemed to have to go back to blitz, 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 blitz. And then we know how that is, live by the blitz and die by the blitz. But I think now they're going to be a lot more getting help, I think, from safeties, from nickel corners, things like that. So it's not going to be just, hey, Isaiah Rodgers, go beyond an island. Mekhi Blackmon, go beyond an island. And then there's another question about the safety position too. Cam Bynum got $15 million a year from the Indianapolis Colts. So now Theo Jackson is a guy that no one outside of Minnesota has heard of, but had maybe the best backup safety training camp I can ever remember last year. And he really sold them on the idea of him becoming a starter this year. So there is a lot of Brian Flores believing in his own evaluations. And I think a lot of that goes back to his scouting background. And he's got such a reputation for hitting on these types of guys that when he says Isaiah Rodgers is my guy, a lot of our reaction is like, okay, that'll probably work then, because he's just been so good at this. And, you look at Cashman, you look at Van Ginkel, especially, those are guys that he identified as being on the upswing, and they turned out to be big stars for them last year.
Yeah, so just one question on the defense for me. The Vikings had a top 5 scoring defense last year, and the strength of it, looking at the numbers, at least seemed to be in the run defense. And then, as you mentioned, the Vikings went out and signed Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave this offseason. So what do you think the ceiling is for this defensive front? Because on paper, it seems like they have the potential to be, one of the best in the league.
Yeah, so the run defense is the biggest question by far, because they are playing a schedule this year with Philadelphia on it, with the Baltimore Ravens, with Washington. So they've got some running quarterbacks mixed in, and then the Packers and the Lions, 2 of the better running teams in the league. And so they moved on from some run stuffers, Jerry Tillery and Jonathan Bullard, and they brought in guys that could get into the backfield. Now, I think that ultimately that's still the way to go. And getting pressure with that front four, huge. But Jonathan Allen has not been the same run defender over the last couple of years, and Javon Hargrave is a little bit on the undersized side. So I think what they're hoping for on this defensive front is that some of their rotational players that they've been developing start to emerge. That would be like a Jalen Redmond or Taki Taimani or Levi Drake Rodriguez, guys that your audience hasn't heard of yet, but maybe by the time the Vikings and Giants play, these guys will be regular rotational players. So I think that they want to mix and match a lot. And I also feel like Brian Flores believes in the way that he schemes up run defense, which is not so much guys overwhelming the offensive line, but being able to move offensive linemen to allow nickel corners and linebackers and safeties to shoot up into gaps and to make plays. And that's really worked for them. I mean, Jerry Tillery was a high draft pick, but hadn't really worked out in a couple of locations. Did a really good job for the Vikings, just kind of moving bodies around up front. So that may be what they ask someone like Hargrave, someone like Allen to do against the run. And then they still do have a top-notch run defender in Harrison Phillips in the middle. But overall, I mean, when you add that type of potential pressure It can be a better defense. The one thing that I would hold back from saying that they'll be like guaranteeing they'll be top 5 again is just the schedule that they're going to play. I mean, you guys know that NFC East is really, really tough, and the NFC North might be the toughest division in all of football. And then the AFC North having to play against the Ravens and the Bengals, like they have their work cut out for them. But I think that went into making those big signings up front.
All right, final question, quickie here. Expectations, you mentioned it. The NFC North is extremely tough. The Lions are awesome. The Packers are very talented. The Bears, I think, could have a really good year this year with Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams in his second year. You guys won 14 games last year, 13 games 3 years ago. You didn't get over the hump in the playoffs, but I think the roster, to your point, is absolutely stacked. But your rookie quarterback. So how are people talking about this team, and how is it being viewed internally, given how many games you won last year, how talented the roster is, but you have a quarterback that's never played an NFL snap?
Yeah, I think that some Vikings fans are probably a little bit nervous to say out loud how high the expectations really are. I mean, because we have seen a lot of young quarterbacks have success in the NFL in recent years. I mean, even though CJ Stroud didn't have the greatest year last year, they're still in the playoffs, winning a playoff game. Brock Purdy's second year, they're in the Super Bowl.
Jaden Daniels went to the NFC title game last year.
Exactly. And how about Jalen Hurts was in the Super Bowl in his, third season, and then wins it in his fifth season. So there are very high expectations for JJ McCarthy to come in and run this thing. And I also think, too, when you had the option of franchise tagging Sam Darnold and keeping him and running it back, and you decide not to, and you decide to put that money elsewhere, I'm not going to grade on a curve. I mean, I think that when you spend this much money, I believe they spent more money this offseason than any other team in the NFL in free agency. And when you've extended Jefferson, you've extended Christian Darrisaw, like you've built this thing up, you've got the coach of the year, you've got one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. There are no excuses. I mean, go win. It doesn't matter that it's a tough division you play in or a tough schedule. You're matched up against those teams if we go position by position. And I think that there is also a lot of signal in the decision that they went with McCarthy. It shows you how much they believe in him. And this isn't, it's not a 4th round draft pick. This is a top 10 overall draft pick from a draft class that's proven to be really, really good. So I think that the bar is making the playoffs, winning the division, winning in the playoffs, like all those things that win now teams are supposed to do. Win now for me doesn't mean this is your only win now year. It just means that the gas pedal is down. The expectations are high. And if it's anything short of that, it's a disappointment.
Matt, good stuff, my friend. Tell the folks where they can find all your awesome work.
Just type in Purple Insider wherever you are. If you're on YouTube or iTunes or Substack newsletter, purpleinsider.football, anything called Purple Insider, that would be me.
Matt, good stuff. Enjoy the rest of your offseason. Enjoy your last bit of vacation before we get to training camp, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
We thank Matthew Collar and Vinny Bonsignor for joining us on the Big Blue Kickoff Live. That was pre-recorded, obviously. They joined us on Zoom. We're still working, by the way, on the phone system. This is an upstairs issue, and to give the guys credit upstairs, they were on this at the end of last week. It's literally like an internal part of our phone system that they're trying to find a replacement for. It's on its way, I'm told, so hopefully by the end of the week. But luckily, we had a bunch of guests and a bunch of team previews to do this week. So much rather now than in a couple weeks when we're trying to get your reaction to what's happening at training camp. So tomorrow, we're going to do all 3 of our NFC East teams, and the hope is by Friday, we're going to have the part in and installed, and we'll be good to go. If not, I'll come up with some other fun show we can do on Friday that we can go for an hour, and we'll take some of your 2 comments. Johnny Mac did a great job getting those up for you guys on Monday's show. So, Matt, 2 good previews there. Very informed guests. We try to get the best guys on talking about some of these teams. And the one thing that both the Vikings and the Raiders have in common with the New York Football Giants is that they're both going to have new starting quarterbacks this year. The Raiders brought in a veteran, much like the Giants did. They traded for Geno Smith. The Giants obviously signed Russell Wilson as a free agent. 2 veteran quarterbacks where you know what you're getting out of the 2 of them. And the Raiders going with a brand new quarterback. Again, as Matthew pointed out, not a rookie, but a guy that has never taken an NFL snap in a regular season game, J.J. McCarthy. So it'll be interesting to see how these 3 quarterbacks in different places impact 3 teams that are really coming from different places.
Yeah, I was going to say all 3 teams, Giants, Raiders, Vikings, all in kind of different phases of their, I don't want to call them rebuilds because the Vikings clearly are not in a rebuild. But yeah, they're just in 3 completely different phases of, I guess, roster construction.
Yes, I think that roster construction is a great way to put it.
And it's funny that the Vikings, you would think, would be the closest to contending for a Super Bowl, but they have the most inexperienced quarterback of the 3.
And that's why that was my first question for Matt.
Yeah. I mean, look, if J.J. McCarthy can play like he did that last season in Michigan, then Minnesota won't skip a beat. But we haven't seen him take one NFL snap in the regular season yet. So that, kind of is a big if. He does have a ton of talent around him, both playmaker-wise, and the Vikings clearly prioritized protection for J.J. McCarthy because, as we discussed, they went out and took Donovan Jackson in the draft in the first round, and also signed Ryan Kelly and Will Fries, not Freeze, Will Fries. But yeah, and then you look at the Raiders. In my opinion, the Raiders are kind of maybe the furthest away from the 3 teams as the contending. I know obviously the Raiders and Giants would be the closest of those 3 teams, just considering how last year went. But I don't know. I look at the Giants roster.
I agree with that. I think the Giants have a deeper roster than the Raiders.
There's just more talent and all over the place on the Giants roster than Las Vegas. Now, having a great roster on paper only takes you so far, which is not very far at all. You need to actually go out there and compete and win. And I will say, the combination of Geno Smith and Pete Carroll makes me think that the Raiders, they may not be ready to contend for a Super Bowl, but they're not going to be some pushover team. Pete Carroll is a fantastic coach.
And by the way, it's Pete Carroll, Geno Smith, sorry for interrupting, Ashton Genty, and Brock Bowers. Those are 4 really nice pieces, especially on offense.
Yes. Their Achilles heel is probably going to be their offensive line, which
Agreed.
With a poor offensive line, I don't know. I mean, we saw Brock Bowers have a ton of success last year with that poor offensive line, but in terms of Geno and Ashton Genty especially, their success might depend on how much that offensive line can step up, which
now Geno coming from a poor offensive line in Seattle, so he should be used to it at this point.
Yeah, that is true. And Geno's stats were kind of mixed last year because he did set new career highs in some completion percentage and passing yards, I believe, but also I believe through a career high in interceptions, and his touchdown to interception ratio was not good. So yeah, well, we're gonna have to see how it does. But having a new quarterback for any NFL team has the potential to just completely change your franchise's fortune. And, we see it every year, but we saw it last year, and this might be a little bit of an extreme example because he was the number 2 pick and he was a rookie, but we saw what Jaden Daniels did to turn around the Washington Commanders overnight, basically. Now, it wasn't just him. Dan Quinn obviously played a very big part in that as well, but putting a new quarterback into the mix can change everything. And, no one is confusing 2025 Russell Wilson for, 2014 Russell Wilson. He's clearly on the older side, the back 9 of his NFL career, but he's out there and wanting to prove everyone to this year that he still has a lot left in the tank. He's not just someone that's going to, ride off into the sunset and, just hand the job over to Jackson Dart in, week 3 or something. He's going to continue fighting and putting his best football out there. And he's going to probably give the Giants the best level of quarterback play this franchise has seen since Eli Manning, which at this point was 6 years ago. And that was, in 2019, we only saw 2 games of Eli.
And that wasn't even good Eli. That was end of
games.
Career Eli.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's probably going to give the Giants the best quarterback play that the Giants have had in a decade, close to a decade.
Yeah.
Even if
you can make that argument,
if he just plays to the level that he did last year, and I think Russell Wilson is in a much better situation this year than he was last year in Pittsburgh, because that Pittsburgh team, as we've discussed many times, was extremely run heavy. They were run first. Arthur Smith wants to just pound the ball on the ground, and there were the rumors that Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith didn't see eye to eye on how they wanted to run the offense, but doesn't seem to be an issue here. Russell Wilson and Brian Daboll seem to very much be on the same page. Russell Wilson looked great in the spring, and I can't wait to see what he does starting next week in training camp, because he, at the very least, is going to raise the floor of this offense. The Giants will be able to sustain more drives, put together longer drives, get the ball into all of their playmakers' hands. They're not going to have to force feed Malik Neighbors 170 targets. Now he might still, get 170 targets just because the Giants are holding onto the football for longer than they did last year. But Russell Wilson is going to help raise this offense and just give us consistent quarterback play, which the Giants have been missing for years now.
Yeah, when you talk about these quarterbacks, and you mentioned, I thought you were right on the money, how these quarterbacks are going to succeed, and this includes Russell Wilson, has a lot to do with what's going on around them, what the supporting cast is. And I think anyone that pays attention knows that quarterbacks do not play football in a vacuum. That's why wins are not a quarterback stat. Wins are a team stat. The way a quarterback plays gets impacted by what's going on around him. And I think when you look at the Giants, the two things that Russell Wilson does really well are make explosive plays, throws a great deep ball. We know about the moon ball, very accurate, and he's willing to take those shots down the field. And the Giants have two speedsters to get deep in Jalen Hyatt and Darius Slayton, and a good contested catch guy who also has speed in Malik Neighbors. We also know Russell Wilson, generally speaking, does not throw interceptions. He does not turn the ball over. He's going to limit big mistakes. So you combine more big plays with fewer really big negative plays, it's going to look better this year. The big factor is going to be controlling the number of sacks he takes. And that has to do with Russell Wilson getting the ball out of his hands quicker, and has to do with them protecting him better. If you can do that, combined with the other two factors, the level of quarterback play is going to be much higher than what we've seen here.
100%. And, Russell Wilson is going to help, I know I just said before, elevate the whole offense, but he's going to, for the first time, the Giants are going to have a quarterback that's going to make the guys around him better. We saw a great, phenomenal season from Malik Neighbors last year, and that was with, let's just call it, inconsistent quarterback play. Not the greatest quarterback play. You give a guy that is just solid, just consistent at the quarterback position for Malik Neighbors, and the sky is the limit for him. And that's just one guy. We've seen Darius Slayton perform since he got to East Rutherford. We've seen him perform the last 6 years with, again, not the greatest quarterback play, and especially in terms of the deep ball, which obviously Darius Slayton can do a little bit of everything, but a lot of his success has been on catching those deep passes down the field. And he's now going to be playing with the best quarterback that he has played with in the NFL at throwing those deep balls. Same goes for Jalen Hyatt, obviously. The first 2 years of his career has not gone how he or any of us would have liked, but he now has a quarterback that matches up the best with his skill set, with his strengths. So, I mean, you can spread it all around to the rest of the playmakers as well with Theo Johnson. The two running backs. I mean, Russell Wilson loves throwing the ball to his running backs. Loves it. And the Giants now have two running backs that are great pass catchers. Obviously, Tyrone Tracy is a former receiver. Cam Scadaboo had so much success catching the football at Arizona State.
And not just checkdowns, by the way, like downfield stuff.
Yeah, like actual, wheel routes, like actual routes and plays down the field. There will be passes thrown to the running backs in that way. So, yeah, I think Russell Wilson will help elevate the guys around him. And quite frankly, this young nucleus of playmakers that the Giants now have will also help bring out the best of Russell Wilson, I believe. I think this was we said it back in March, in all offseason leading up to free agency, but Giants signing Russell Wilson really was just a great match with what both sides were kind of looking for.
And now what it's going to come down to, and I feel like I might have said this before, does the offensive line play well enough to allow all that to happen? Have we had this conversation about the Giants over the past 8 years? I'm not sure. Have we?
Maybe once or twice.
Maybe once or twice. And that's really what this is going to come down to. Because and we're going to have an episode on the Giants Huddle podcast coming up with Warren Sharp in the next couple of weeks. And I won't, destroy all the great data he has. But needless to say, when Russell Wilson wasn't pressured the last year with Pittsburgh, well, basically a top 10 quarterback in terms of EPA per play. That's how good he was on early downs without pressure. So if you can, and again, he invites some of that pressure himself with the way he holds the football and stuff like that. So a lot of that is on the quarterback. But if his ability to perform is going to be largely dependent on how well he can be protected. He's 37. He's not as mobile as he was when he was 27. That's the way of the world. None of us are as mobile as we were 10 years ago, okay?
Not unless you're Tom Brady.
Yes, and even he wasn't quite as mobile. But can the offensive line be good enough to allow Russell Wilson to do his thing. And that is going to go a long way towards determining how this season's going to go. I think if they all stay healthy, and frankly, I think you could even survive an injury at, one of the spots that's not left tackle based on what we've seen. Like, if John Michael Schmitz gets hurt and you have to move Greg Van Roten to center, you could survive that. Like, Greg Van Roten has shown he can play center in the league. You can survive that. I think we've seen enough from the Aaron Stinnies, and you hope Evan Neal ends up being the number one guy, that you can survive with one of those two guys having to play guard for you. Like, you'll be okay. You'll be fine. And even James Hudson, if he has to step in for Jermaine Illuminor, I think you can survive that. It's the Andrew Thomas thing that the Giants have shown that they have trouble surviving. You hope with James Hudson here that drop-off is not as big as it's been in past years, but you never want to lose your franchise left tackle. So I think if this group can stay healthy, and Andrew Thomas most specifically can be healthy at the start of the year and show that he can be on the field for 17 games, 18 weeks, that this offensive line should be good enough to allow the type of things you were talking about with the playmakers to happen.
Yeah, so for those of you that check Giants.com, we've been doing this series the last couple of weeks, 25 questions in 25 days leading up to training camp. And that's myself, John, and Dan Salomon upstairs taking turns answering different questions.
What are we down to, like question 8 now or something crazy like that?
I believe today was 8, yeah.
Oh, man.
And I'm gonna jump ahead and give just a tiny preview of the last question because it pertains to this conversation. Is basically, I don't remember word for word, but basically is, what is the key to success for the Giants this season? And I started writing my answer today.
I believe that's question 1.
That's
correct?
the number one question. I started writing my question today and then realized, you know what, let me first look at what John wrote and just make sure I'm not writing on the same topic, which we did not.
We did it.
And I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want to ruin it. But for yours, do you remember what you wrote?
I did all the quarterbacks, correct?
Yes, you wrote improved quarterback play. And that matched perfectly with what I began to write, which is improved offensive line play, because the two go hand in hand together. If the offensive line can give Russell Wilson time in the pocket, and I'm not saying they need to be an elite offensive line. We've discussed this so many times. They don't have to be a top 5 offensive line.
Just be between 15 and 18.
Yes, middle of the pack. Right. If they are a middle of the pack offensive line, which, let's not forget, 2022, the Giants had a middle of the pack offensive line, and it led to Daniel Jones having the best season of his career. Now, obviously, we hope Russell Wilson's numbers this year are still better than what Daniel Jones put up that season. But
at least passing-wise, yes.
Passing-wise, yes, of course. But yeah, that's all the offensive line needs to do. And as you mentioned, it really, the biggest thing is just the health of Andrew Thomas. We saw the last 2 years what happens when he goes down. In 2023, he gets hurt in that season opener, misses the entire first half of the season, and by the time he comes back, the season's done, basically.
No, it was done. It was done.
Last year, the first 6 weeks of the season, other than that week 1 game against the Vikings, which was just all around bad, the next 5 weeks, the offensive line was solid. Again, not elite, but it was not bottom 10. It was a middle of the pack unit. They had the same 5 starters play every single snap together until Andrew Thomas got hurt in week 6. And then once he got hurt, everything sort of crumpled around. And then it was that rotating door at just about every position along the offensive line that we've unfortunately grown somewhat accustomed to seeing around here the last, however many years. So if Andrew Thomas can just stay on the field, we've seen what he can do, what his ceiling is, and his ceiling is an all-pro tackle. If he can stay on the field, I have no doubt that he's just going to play like he has been the last couple of years when he's actually been on the field. And the Giants have obviously made an effort to improve the guys next to him and around him as well. Just about every position, whether it's the selection of John Michael Schmitz a couple of years ago, which obviously, again, last year may not have gone exactly as he or Giants fans would have hoped, but he did take a step from his rookie year. And you hope this year he takes another step, a bigger step, and same goes for the guys around him, whether it's John Runyon and Greg Van Roten, Runyon and Evan Neal. Like, who knows the combination of interior linemen that will be surrounding John Michael Schmitz, but they have improved. Joe Schoen has improved the whole unit over the last couple of off seasons. So improved offensive line play. If we get that, we will see an improved Russell Wilson from last year, I believe. And again, no one's confusing him with Russell Wilson from 10 years ago, but the Giants don't need him to be that Russell Wilson. They just need a solid, consistent passer that can get the ball to this young group of playmakers and not turn the ball over. And if the offensive line can stay healthy and give him time, I think we're going to get that from Russell Wilson this year.
I know we're over, but let me ask you this simple question.
Yeah.
If I told you today and I gave you a contract, I know this is like a Lucifer style move here, but it's not. There's nothing bad that's going to happen over this. If I slide the paper, there's no funny language in there, and it says this year, by some objective measure that doesn't exist, the Giants have the 19th best offensive line, and Russell Wilson is the 18th best quarterback. Actually, I'm going to be less generous. He's the 20th best quarterback in the league this year. 19th best offensive line, 20th best quarterback. Would you sign that paper right now?
Can I just ask, at least in terms of Russell Wilson, what metrics are being used there? Like,
how about like
off of?
EPA per play,
Okay.
or something like that? Or the Giants with this Giants passing game. Let's say they're 20th in the league in passing yards per game. How about that?
Yeah, I would take that.
You would take that?
Yeah.
And with this defense, I think you're going to have a pretty decent record.
Exactly. You literally stole the words out of my mouth, because we all know, I'm not breaking any news here, that the strength of this team this year is most likely going to be on the defensive side of the ball, where that unit has the potential to be an actual elite unit, one of the best in the league. Potential. Obviously, all the pieces are there, but they need to put it all together and actually perform on Sundays. So, yeah, with what I think this defense can be, give me the 18th or 20th best passing offense, middle of the pack offensive line, because I think the run game will be slightly better if that's the case. And again, with that defense,
agreed.
I think that's all the offense needs to be. In 2022, it's not like the Giants had an elite offense and that's what carried them to the playoffs. Again, Daniel Jones threw 14 touchdowns that year and they still made it. So, yeah, sign me up for that. I would take that. Especially the offensive line part, because if the Giants can have the 18th best offensive line, that will mean good things for this offense as a unit.
And just to give you guys an idea, in terms of where the Giants have been in terms of passing yards per game here, I'm going to bring it up and make sure that I have it here. I'm sure they were near the bottom. I just don't have it handy at the top of my head here. So passing yards per game last year, the Giants ranked 28th. All right, so that would be a jump of about 9 spots. Probably, that's a 30%-ish jump, an improvement. Jump. I think we would all be happy with that. In 2023, and this is probably even worse, I would imagine. The Giants were 31st at passing yards per game at 169. And I'm curious. I don't remember this. I probably should. I don't remember anything anymore because I have 2 young children that suck the brain power out of me. Where do you think the Giants ranked in passing yards per game in their playoff season in 2022? I don't know the answer to this either. I'm going to say they were 23rd.
Well, if I remember correctly, Daniel Jones threw for about a little over 3,000 yards. So that must be, my guess is 25th.
All right, let's say 26th.
Wow.
So even in a year that Giant fans remember fondly, they were just 26th. All right, I'm not going to keep going back further than that because, trust me, it doesn't get much better. So
it gets worse, I think.
That's probably the high watermark, sadly. So if you could get to the 19th or 20th and get over, can you average more than 200 passing yards per game? That's a pretty low bar here, folks. To give you an idea, if you average, I know we're going way over now, but now, unfortunately, I'm interested in this conversation now, which is a problem. If you just get to 220 passing yards per game, where do you think you would have? Well, that's 2022. Let me look at last year. If you averaged 220 passing yards per game last year, Matt, where do you think that would rank you in the NFL in terms of passing yards per game?
Around 20th, maybe 18th.
Believe it or not, that would rank you 15th in the league.
15th.
Last year.
Okay.
That was higher than I thought too. So let's be a little less generous. If you're averaging 200 on the dot, you're at 24. So that's the meat of the curve you want to aim for, right? You want to aim for somewhere between, for example, the Broncos were 20th last year. They were at 212. Miami was 15th last year. They were 219.8. So if you can get to that 210 or higher, I think that puts you in a pretty good spot based on where we've seen the Giants been in seasons past. And I think, to your point, the running game is going to be good enough. So if you can get above 210 passing yards per game, I think that's a pretty darn good target for you to look at when you're trying to based on kind of where the Giants are.
Yeah, and going back to that 2022 year with Daniel Jones, he averaged almost 200 yards on the dot, 200.3 yards per game passing. But the biggest difference, Russell Wilson is not, no offense to Russell Wilson, he's not rushing for over 700 yards this year. I'd be shocked if that happens. That aspect of his game is not there to the same level as it was for Daniel Jones a couple of years ago. So I would think you take some of that rushing yards from Daniel Jones that year, you put it to his passing for Russell Wilson this year, and all of a sudden you're going to get into that sweet spot right there with 210 to 220 passing yards per game. Because again, Russell Wilson is not, despite the fact that he did look, pretty spry out there in the spring, he's not running the ball, what was it, 2022, 120 times like Daniel Jones did.
Here's a fun one. In Russell Wilson's rookie year, he averaged 195 passing yards per game.
Okay.
I'll throw that year out because it's his rookie year. Other than that rookie year, what do you think his low watermark was for passing yards per game? And how many times do you think he finished below 210?
His low mark, I'm going to guess close to 210 then, 208.
His low mark was his second year with the Broncos, believe it or not, where in 15 games he averaged 205 passing yards per game.
Okay.
His second lowest mark was his second year in the NFL, where he was at 209.8, so nearly 210. Last year with the Steelers, he was at 225.6.
And again, that was with a run-first offense.
Correct. Now, I'm not sure if do passing yards per game and the team stats, do they subtract yards taken for sacks in that number?
In his personal?
No, not in the personal,
stats?
in the team rankings. It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
I want to say I think so, but I'm not.
Okay, so
sure.
So that would adjust then, because he's gonna lose 20 to 25 yards on sacks if he can get sacked 4 times a game, right? Yeah. So that'll reduce it. But even so, look, last year 225 for Pittsburgh. His first year in Denver was 235, 222, 263, 256, 215, 248, 263, 251. So these are bigger numbers than we've ever seen from a Giant quarterback since Eli Manning.
A long time.
So the short and short of it is that it should be better this year if he can get the help that he needs around him. Now, some business before we go, and stay tuned. This is important. You guys will be interested in this. This is not just sponsor reads, which you should also be interested in because they're awesome. Our sponsors rule. First and foremost, John Settle podcast went up today. Our Lane Kiffin podcast, Rookies Reported. I thought it'd be a good time to get some insight into Jackson Dart. So it's our final college coach. Got all the draft picks done this year. It's been a while since I got one from every school. I managed it this year. Lane Kiffin gave me about 17 minutes, I think it was, something like that. So go on, get a lot of good insight about Jackson Dart and what he did at Ole Miss. It's a great interview. Go check that out. Also, there are still tickets available if you want to go see the Giants at training camp here at the Quest Diagnostics Training Center.
Come say hi to us.
Yes, you can say hi. You will see the bronze blur, Paul Dottino, going up and down the sidelines and in and out of the stands. I believe mostly weekday seats are left, but go check. There are multiple days left. There's a lot of days, so go check it out. You could see Abdul Carter. You could see Jackson Dart. You can go, remember, first few days, you're not going to have padded practices, so if you want to be strategic, wait until after that first weekend. Then you're going to get more padded practices if you want to see guys like Abdul Carter work with their pads on. So Giants.com/training camp. Yeah, I know. We're still going, Pearson. Shut up. I know. We got into an interesting conversation. You're going to have a good teaser, okay? I got you your teaser. That's the reason we went long. Yeah, we're going. I'm doing promotions. I have to get the copy in, Pearson. A lot of fun stuff for the kids to do at training camp. You have blow-ups. You have concessions, food, activities for the kids. The kids can get autographs from the current players after practice. Everybody can line up and get tickets from the alumni before practice. So for autographs. So
high five lines.
High five lines as well. So Giants.com/training camp. Look at the schedule. Find your tickets. Buy them. We hope to see you out there. And also the Giants are once again doing their 5K race and kids run presented by Quest on Sunday, October 26th, 9 a.m. MetLife Stadium. That proceeds will benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants will receive a commemorative t-shirt after the race. Stay for a festival with appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ post-race. Register now at Giants.com/5K. Giants Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, pardon me. And I am trying to get Paul Dottino to take on all challengers for speed walking at the 5K race to see if you can beat Paul Dottino as he speed walks. If you can, we'll get you some type of prize.
Good luck to you.
Maybe some pasta or something like that. I don't know. Something Paul can provide. That's all we have today. And again, tomorrow it's going to be an all pre-recorded show. So are we going to play that live, Pierce, or are we just going to post it? We're going to play it live? All right, so we're going to play that live at 12:30 tomorrow. YouTube, Giants.com. That'll be our whole NFC East, and then we're done with our team previews. So it's going to be Dallas, which I recorded this morning, and we're recording Washington and Philadelphia in about 15 minutes here. So those will be up on tomorrow's show. And then Friday, hopefully the phones will be back up. We'll do a little bit of a training camp deal or some other topic. If it's not, either way, we'll be with you on Friday at 12:30 with Dottino and I. For Matthew Citak, I'm John Schmeelk. That was fun. We'll see you next time on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. From the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio, keep getting better.